This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Good evening, and welcome to the Chaim Aruchim session. What we're going to be discussing today are issues that are very difficult and which people don't really like to focus on. The question that we're going to ask is not an easy question. What is that? Oh. The question that we are going to ask ourselves, the question that we usually ask ourselves in life is, Wie macht man a Leben? But Reb Shalom Shvadron Zatzal used to say, there's another question, and the question is, Wie macht man a Starben? Now, what Reb Shalom meant was that, what is the madrega we want to be in when the time comes? In Torah and Avodah and Yerushalayim. We're going to ask ourselves a little bit of a different question. What does the aging population need to know, and what do their children need to know? What do we need to know about this stage in life? We're going to be hearing from the Rav, from Rabbanim, and Chaim Aruchim was created to make this process easier. But Chaim Aruchim is an organization, we do a lot of good work. But what the focus of tonight's session is, what is your responsibility? What is the people's responsibility, the family's responsibility? As an organization, we've done a lot. We've met with every CEO of the hospitals. We have a 24-hour hotline. We answer almost 1,000 calls a month. We have here, I believe, sitting here, Mrs. Leah Horowitz, who's busy all day helping people make decisions and to implement the Rabbanim's decisions, the Rabbanim's psak. We had 3 successful lawsuits, which makes the hospitals very, very uncomfortable, but at the same time, they have a lot of respect for us, and they deal with us in a respectful way, and we usually get our way, but it's tough. We have a Kol Kaira, and there is some, the material is there's some material here, but there's some material by the booth, which was signed by the Gedolei Yisrael, Gedolei Poskim, about not doing the confirmatory test. There's a Kol Kaira signed by Reb Chaim Kanievsky and Reb Yitzchak Zilberstein regarding the importance of Chaim Aruchim. We've done a lot. We've passed laws in New York State that helps our cause, and we've stopped laws in New York State that is detrimental to our cause. So we feel, Baruch Hashem, at Chaim Aruchim, we've done a lot, but we can't do the job without the community knowing what it is that they have to do to make sure that people stay alive as long as the Rebbeinu Shalom wants to, and they're not taken away beforehand by some professionals. So to introduce our first speaker, I'd like to introduce Rivi Schwebel, who to me is a Goyen and Kibbut Aveim, someone who lived through some of these problems, and he's going to introduce the Rav as our first speaker. Rivi.
Good evening and welcome, Chashuv Rabbanim and friends. Today's session, entitled Aging Parents, Important Issues Parents and Children Must Know, focusing on a topic that is relevant to us all. In an age where average lifespan has gotten much longer, understanding our obligations is paramount. I'd like to welcome first my co-chairman and board members, Reb Shmuel Lefkowitz and Reb Gedalia Weinberger. My interest in this topic and subsequent involvement with Chaim Aruchim came out of a first-hand experience I had with my father, Olav Shalom, as he valiantly fought a horrible illness that gripped him at the age of 84. The final year of his life was spent in and out of the hospital, and we realized from the outset that the doctors did not want to be proactive with his treatment. Take him home, make him feel comfortable, I heard it over and over again from every doctor. Just take him home. He lived the life already. Just let him go home. Make him feel comfortable. Early on, my father was in the ICU, and a nurse came out and said, "Your father's IV line is clogged. Do you want to have it replaced?" I thought I wasn't hearing correctly. I said to her, "Why wouldn't I want to have the IV replaced? Am I not understanding something? What are you saying?" Her quick response was, "Look, he's in the ICU. He's an old man. What for?" Could she begin to understand the value of Shabbos, Lulav and Esrig, Chanukah Menorah, lighting the candles together with the Einiklach and his children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren? On Rosh Hashanah, my father davened, and he said, "Hineni," for all the Jewish patients in Cornell, while he was there as a patient himself. The chizuk they all received from him was immeasurable, and it gave him a sense of hope and relevance. The time that I spent with my father, I will forever cherish. And I stand witness that when family members are present, it relays a profound message that this patient is important. He matters. He is relevant. His care is vital. Chaim Aruchim answers over 10,000 calls a year and helps many families through their difficult times. Today's session focuses on the halachic ramifications of caring for parents as they age. It is my kavod to introduce Rabbi Yisrael Mantel, the Rav of Kahal Adas Yisharim.
Choshev Askanim, Choshev Rabbanim, dear friends, the topic I want to concentrate on is the responsibility of children towards their parents when it comes to a time of sometimes difficult decisions. I think it was mentioned, the title was, "To what extent do children have to care for kibbut, how far kibbut over aim goes." There is a song in Yiddish, paraphrasing the Chazal, that by Mamet HaSinai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu approached the nations to ask them if they want to take the Torah, and they asked what is mentioned in the Luchas. So the song goes that he went to the Germans and they asked what is mentioned. So they said, "Leisirzach." That's our métier, that's our occupation, so that's not for us. He went to the communists. What is mentioned there? Leisignaiv. Entire setup of the state is Geneva. So that's not for us. He went to the Arabs said Leisinoiv. And to the French, he said, "Leisachmoit." He came to America. He said, what is mentioned there in the Luchas? Oh, we don't need commandments for that. We have Mother's Day. And Father's Day might be, yes. The Chovos Halvovos says a Chiddush. We know there's a mitzvah of Yira, Ish Oviv Imo Tiro. There's a mitzvah of Kavod, Kavod es Ovich v'Simecho. Chovos Halvovos mentions Avoido, Yiro and Kavod. Avoido to serve. In Chaya Odom says, V'chayev l'shamshoi, is obligated to serve his father or mother, ke'evet hameshamish l'rabbi, like a servant who serves his master. We're not used to that, to serve. There's a discussion, all of us know there are mitzvahs sometimes when a person is learning and a mitzvah comes up. So if it's a mitzvah, nobody else can do it. He has to interrupt the learning and to go to be mekayim the mitzvah. Tefillin comes up. Let's say I'm learning now. Tefillin, learning is choshev. Well, tefillin, you have to put on tefillin. That's now. Let's say if it's a mitzvah she'efshar la'aseh yedei acherem, others could do it. Let's say I have to go visit a patient in the hospital. And my friend told me, I'll do it. I will do it. I go anyway. I go to the hospital and visit a patient. So I don't have to be mevatel my kviyos because of that. Because the purpose is this person should be taken care of. Somebody should visit him. So I can go in and learning. What is with kibbut aveim? Somebody else could bring my father the food that he needs, or to go to the pharmacy for him. And I'm learning. I can send him. The Shem said no. You can't. That means it's like tefillin. So what's the big deal? My father will have what he needs. Not me. Somebody else will bring it to him. The idea of kibbut av is not only my father should have what he needs or my mother. The idea of kibbut av is avdus. I have to serve him. I have to be there for him. Nobody can take that over. It's like tefillin. Nobody can put on tefillin for me. So I have an obligation towards my father to serve him, even though the other one will take care of him and everything will be fine. But it's my mitzvah, l'shamesh, to be an evet. An evet can't send the other one. You as a servant, you have to do that. L'shamesh, l'shamshoy ke'evet ha'meshamesh l'rabbi. Choshev Rov, who happened to be at the convention, told me last year that his Rebbetzin was at the hospital and he came to visit her quite late at night. And in the same room, there was a lady, another patient, Nochi, and he was amazed. The daughter was there. It was after 10 at night. The daughter, non-Jewish daughter of this patient was there, and he gave her a compliment. You're caring for your mother. We don't see that 10 o'clock at night. So she said, tomorrow they pulled the plug for my mother, so I want to spend the last few hours with her. So he killed everything. That was the idea of kibbut av, to feel high the last few hours. And what was till now, and what was yesterday, it might be somebody should sleep there. No, the last few hours, very holy. That's obviously not the approach of Bnei Yisrael, of the idea of care for parents. We see people who are skonim, who are huge goymel chasodim. They have organizations of Gemilas Chesed, and the parents are sometimes neglected. Because of that, I don't know, it looks like it's not so in society. Gemilas Chesed and organizations is more accepted, is more spoken about than to care for their own parents. Nobody would know that. Nobody would care for them. I want to finish with another example regarding this topic. How people sometimes, an obvious kibbut av is far removed. It happened, a person that comes to me for his shilas, he came to announce me that a boy was born, a baby boy was born, and he told me, I have a heart condition, so I want to take Sunday course for myself. It's a schooler, Sunday course, Elianovi. So I asked him, your father was already Sandik? He said, no. But he's not makpid. My father doesn't think about that at all. He's not makpid at all. So I told him, I don't understand. Sunday course is a schooler. There's a schooler for the Torah, from the Torah, for kibbut aveim. L'man yarichon yomecho. You have a heart condition. Give your father Sunday course. You're a kind of mitzvah deraisa. And the school, what is better school for the Torah? Well, all the scholars are all nonsense compared to what the Torah promises, what the Rebbeinu Shalom promises. Next day comes back to me. I have to tell the Rav, I was mechabed my father with Sandakos. He almost jumped to the roof from Simcha that I gave the Sandakos. And do I ask you? We are so into scholars and all to nonsense. And the basics, as one of the Aseres Hadvorim, a mitzvah deraisa, as long as it's not a scholar, that doesn't speak to me. Ad kedei kach. That's in general terms. And definitely kal v'chomer when it comes to medical issues. Their parents need their children. They need to be protected. So we want to concentrate on a few points regarding that. The first thing is that where there's loyalenu, a serious condition of parents, children are not allowed to leave their parents alone in hospital. It's not allowed to happen. 24/7. When there's chas v'sholom, a serious condition, a minor thing, a serious condition. For the posheter reason, forget about the mitzvah of kibbut avim. Forget about that now. When doctors see and nurses notice that children do not care, why should they care? Even without saying a word, when a doctor and nurse comes in the room and she sees that is always a relative is present, the approach and the care to this patient will be different. Might be a thing that is not connected to that at all. There are a lot of chum psokim that a woman, by giving birth, the husband shouldn't be there in the room, childless and whatever. I tell them, you all go there. You take a tehillim, be in a corner, turn the other side. But the doctors and the nurses should see that there's a husband who cares. They don't understand all these halachas. Yes. If they see the husband cares, they understand that's a stable family here. So we will care also. We will care for this lady, we will care for the baby. It's a pikuach nefesh shaila to stay there, not a question. For children, to parents, is definitely, it's very, very, very important. So what we will say, there's a problem. People go to work. That's indeed a problem. So first of all, one can appoint other family members. Second of all, Baruch Hashem, Achshar Dora. People usually, when they can not work on Chalamoid, they don't go to work on Chalamoid. They go to work. And use daiti, when it's a question of caring for parents, and they might have a problem with their job because it will take too many days off, they should go and work Chalamoid to make out for it for the job on Chalamoid and to be with their parents when they need it, when it's a pikuach nefesh shaila. That's obvious. Later it would be a heter of dover ovet. When there's a danger, a person might lose his job, so he will have to go to work. There's no brayer. But a pikuach nefesh shaila, to be with his father, and will take off to make up for it in another time. Shtetzach, one can appoint children and whatever, but somebody has to be around all the time, 24/7. There's another problem. Children want the best for their parents. And they wish that their parents should be healthy and should be well and get out of the hospital, Gesundheit. And because of that, when a lot of children and everybody is concerned and he thinks that's the best thing or that might be the best thing, so all the children on their way will approach the nurses and the doctors. Maybe you should do that, and maybe you should do that. Doctors and nurses don't have patience for that, and they get upset. For one child, they will hear that, and for the other child, they will hear that. And sometimes most people don't understand the medicine, so will they speak nonsense, and it will only harm. It will only harm for the treatment of the patient. So the first thing is, one has to appoint a Rav. If a person belongs to a killer, whatever, where he has a reliable Rav, a Rav that they could ask, and a Rav who is ready to get up from his benkel and to go to the hospital to see what the patient's matzav is and to be ready to speak to the doctors. There are rabbanim like that. Yes, definitely. And there will be a fight. The child will say, my Rav, this Rav. The best thing is to appoint the Rav of the patient because he will trust him. He knows him from before. And when the father or the mother, they refuse to have some treatment, instead of pressing them and making pressure, one could make them upset. It's also dangerous when one makes them upset if they are in a very bad situation. So one could tell them, listen, we'll ask the Rav. Whatever the Rav will say, you agree, right? To listen to the psukim of the Rav. Whatever the Rav will say, that you will do. That's the most easiest way for a patient to accept, and definitely in this situation, his Rav's psak, that will be. However, if I may warn you, you hear that from me, I'm not allowed to say that. One has to know which Rabbonim to choose. There are Rabbonim who come from a certain school who completely off the line regarding advice of patients. They go along with the accepted line. Life is not worthwhile anymore. We don't speak about making intrusive things. No, when halacha doesn't require it, say one shouldn't rather not do it. We don't speak about that. But even one could save patients, one could save people. And because this nonsense approach, people le'oleinu pass away for no real reason. For no reason, one could save them. So one has to know who to choose. I can't elaborate more, I'm not allowed to. Yeah. It's very important, because this problem of siblings, that one of the children should be appointed to talk to the doctors. It would be great when the parents, when they write this proxy, this medical proxy, they should point out which of the children. But sometimes parents don't want to do that. So they don't want to make the others upset. So children have to be responsible enough to sit down together and to decide, might be the one who understands the best, or the one who has the most time. Yeah, he should be the one who deals with the doctors. And when there's a concern among the children, they will share with him the concern. And he will then bring it to the doctors. If the doctors have to deal with 5 people and in-laws and Geschäften, it will be, like I told before, a real disaster. They will be upset, and they will not care anymore. They will do at the end what they want, and not what is real in the interest of the patient. One has to be open for a second opinion. Happened already, I saw sometimes that the doctors prepared the children in such an extent to be ready for the worst, that when somebody comes up with an idea, they feel already, we're already over it. We can't take it anymore. Yes, one has to be ready for a second opinion. Sometimes good doctors can have an idea and it could save the patient's life more than sometimes, but really. And a lot of times one cannot rely on the doctors. That's why one needs a Rav or a second opinion of a doctor, a frum doctor who understands, will be able to give advice. I want to share with you a few stories. In a certain hospital, a doctor, Yehudi, Shema Torah Mitzvah, Shema Shabbos. He's in charge of the ethical committee. He's of the committee for the ethics. Himself, he's a great doctor, and a real great doctor, a caring doctor. But when it comes to end-of-life issues, he says, leave them alone. So there were people, children of a member by us, that came to me. They asked me, the doctor doesn't want, we think intubation would be good. The doctor says it doesn't make sense. This patient has a weak heart. What will it help intubation? We'll all be suffering another few days. Leave it. So I said, you know what? I come with you and we meet the doctor. So we meet the doctor, and he's a fine person. I come in, Kalalasishurim. So he tells me, I just got a present, Rav Schwab's book on tefillah. It's a wonderful thing. It's definitely pleasant to speak to such a person. Hashem Shabbos, he's a Baal Koira in his shul. So he tells Rav Mantel, understand, time of this patient is over. We'll make him suffer with intubation. So I told him, isn't that so that with intubation he could still live a nice sometimes? And doctor, I told him, he would never participate. This patient anyway wouldn't participate in the Olympic Games or to participating in a running in a marathon. He would sit at home, daven, maybe look at the news, enjoy visit of the children and the Enikler. What is that? Anyway, this person wouldn't do something else. So he tells me, what do you call that she could still live a certain time? So I said 6 months. He told me 6 months, never. So I told him 4 months. He didn't answer. So he asked the children, what do you want? They said, we want what the Rav says. She got upset. He didn't say a word. Okay, I will do it. Even I don't hold of that. I wrote down the date when we spoke. This person from hospital went to a very good place, one has to know that. It's Henry Carter on the east side. It's not only a pure nursing home. They have 24/7 doctors, 24/7. A nursing home usually doesn't have that. And they can give care to a patient that a regular nursing home cannot do. And there's outstanding dedication. I went to visit this patient at least two times during, I wrote down the date when I spoke to the doctor. The things that when the 6th month was over, I had a Yetzirah to call this doctor to say, she's still alive. 6 months is over. Yeah. This patient lived 11 months. And she was able to get up from bed. She enjoyed the visit of children. Of children and grandchildren. I met her with a siddur when I came. She was listening to the news. She was able to hear Chias Shofar on Rosh Hashanah in this place. Yeah. My Rebbetzin held me back to call the doctor because you meet him, you speak to him, he will get very upset. Yes. She was right, Gustavo, she was right. But that's a person who head of the ethics, and he decides about life and death. Never 6 months. Never 6 months. I gave in 4 months. But that he did not get anymore. And this person lived 11 months with nachas in between, not suffering. The last month she had a stroke. Okay, what can we do? Yes, but the 10 months I'll call upon him. Real nachas. And when I came in, oh, Rav Mantel, how are you doing? Yes, I thank you very much for visiting. In a good spirit. Can we rely on a good doctor, a dedicated doctor to his patients? It comes to these things, to these hashkafas, out. That's completely out. That's one. There was a member in our congregation, an elderly lady. She was bleeding. And they called the doctor. So on the phone, he said, your mother is an elderly lady. Leave her alone. You know, the children came to me, and one of the children is working at a doctor. So I said, she should go to the hospital. Rav Mantel, I know this type. Does bring the hospital will not help anything. Leave it. I said, you might be right. Let's go to the hospital. If the hospital decides there's nothing to do, we bring her back home. The hospital made some tests. They found out that in the pharmacy they were wrong with the medication. They gave the wrong medication. They were mistaken. So they straightened it out. I think this lady lived 1 year for sure. I think even 2 years. She has a 90th birthday with all the siblings. There's a picture. She was able to participate, I think, 2 weddings of grandchildren or great-grandchildren or whatever. And there's on the phone, the doctor decides about life and death, loyally, on the phone. How can one do such a thing? It's not responsible. Without seeing, without looking, so we can't rely. We cannot rely. When doctors say they can help, we should rely on them. When they say they can't or they come with their psukim, we should ask for a second opinion or to ask a Rav. Even the Rav is not knowledgeable about old medicines, whatever, to ask the Rav how to behave and what to do. Doctors hold back food from patients. Sometimes feeding might be dangerous. We agree to that. Agudah might be dangerous. Might be a reflux coming out of the lungs. We know all this, we know that. So I spoke to them, to the doctor, why do you hold back food? Oh, food is dangerous. I knew the condition of the patient, so I told them, in the stomach, when you feed directly to the stomach and you give a tiny little, that's dangerous. She was upset with me, this doctor. She said, Rabbi, when the time is over, the time is over. So I told them, we are not asked if you should be born or not. So we will not be asked when we should pass away or not. Nobody can know that. This person was indeed very weak. They started to feed her, but she came back. She went back to the nursing home. She enjoyed not a lot of time, but a few weeks, surrounded by the children. The doctors would have sworn, a shvur, that she would never leave the hospital alive. And that's not what happened. To hold back food, if there's no mamish sakona, I told them, you don't have to give a load. Load is dangerous. A few drops, and again a few drops. That would give us some strength. So they're no brainer, so they agreed to do that. That is why one can't rely. When it comes to these things, one cannot rely on doctors. Yes. One has to know that. When there's a Rav, one should start a second opinion, another doctor or whatever, a doctor who goes according to the halacha. It's not we want to push. We don't want to make suffering, definitely not. I spoke once to Rabbi Yashiv years ago. I told him, one gives morphine to a patient, one takes away the pain, but Leoleno, one could cause that the end is nearer. So Rabbi Yashiv told me sometimes pain is as dangerous as other things. And it's right. Pain alone is a dangerous thing. But one has to know the measure, one has to know the balance. A Rav or a doctor, Yira Shomayim, he can know the balance. Others, they don't mind. Life is over anyway. It's not worth it. A young person, Reagan, when he was president, he had to dye his hair in black because he would have white hair. Nobody will look to him. Look at him. What interesting, an old man. Yes, he's a young person. Oh, that's a person. That's the approach of medicine. A young person, there's care. But when it comes to older people, children have to stand and to watch and to see exactly what they are doing, to look at the medications and to ask, to write down how much they give from that and how much from that. Is that the right thing? And to ask. Doctors sent to hospice hospitals, Calvary, let's say. Calvary is a place of retzicha, kapshutai mamish. The advertisement is, we spent nice days, and with music, we were laughing together and crying together. We know all this nonsense. They make chas v'sholem that your mamisa is closer. I have a story. I'm close to a young man. His father is a pulmonologist, and his father started his career in Calvary. His father is Jewish, not from, Jewish. He told me he started his career in Calvary. He noticed that some patient might be saved. So he sent a patient to another hospital out of Calvary. The administration of this hospital was upset with him, not poshet. You hammer a panasa. You take away our patient. So he felt the situation, so he left. So that's a place that is specialized of end-of-life care to make sure that end of life comes, to make sure. They cared for the end of life. They make sure that it happens. That's not a place to go. Hospice might be a major trouble. Unless it's mamash don al pi Torah, a person might have a heart attack and could be saved. They give him aspirin, he should have pain. Or not aspirin, they give him Advil or Huezos. He shouldn't have pain, he shouldn't suffer, or give him morphine to take away the pain. Some states, what happens? He passes away after a few hours if there's no care. Yeah. Because hospice are meant to accompany a person, everything should go a smooth transition. Yes. That's not what we are standing for. Versteht sich? We know Rav Moshe's Shuvas a lot, and G'dolei HaPoskim, intrusive things, when there's no hope, one wouldn't make suffering. Definitely not. Yeah. But there are sometimes one can save a patient, and because doctor decided that it's over, they are the Balei Dvorim, they are the people to decide when life is over. People say in Yiddish, a Rav has the reshus to heal. That he can't heal, he has no reshus to approach that. So be quiet, don't say anything. He has reshus to heal, but not to convince people that this person can be healed. Sometimes the main Avada it can be, not wild, but sometimes one can really save a patient. I want to mention two places in the New York area that are great. After a person is released to hospital and needs care, that's like I said before, Henry Carter on the east side Manhattan, and there's a place called Kindred in Wayne, New Jersey. There might be other places too. That's the place we know from our work in our killer and so on. Then there's another problem. The first thing that people come in hospital, they're asked to sign a DNR. Do not resuscitate. That's the first thing. We Yehudim would have the first thing, might be one can save this person. The first thing is, do not resuscitate. Might be in some cases, one has to ask, there is an Indian not to resuscitate. If it would be only make longer a life of suffering. And resuscitate is also big suffering, not pashat. But one should not sign such a thing. Because when one signs that, one gives the impression to the doctors, the family understands already that's the end. So even they don't want, if they're good people, the doctors, if they see the family goes along, we prepare for the end. If one doesn't sign, the answer should be, when it would come to it, we'll tell you. But it doesn't work if nobody's around. If Chas v'Sholom at the moment that they have to ask the children, nobody's around, so they will resuscitate. That's why people sign. Don't do it. That's also a reason why people have to be around all the time. One should ask, they will ask the Rav before, if something happens, what should one do, and so on. So the children will be around not to sign. Signing is a wrong message that one sends, a wrong message to doctors. They will be around there. Chas v'Sholom, when something happens, the person who is around will be told by the family what he has to say, the right answer, according to the circumstances, what was passed to them and what was told to them. Yeah. We have sometimes another problem. Parents sometimes could make it difficult a bit. And they say, I don't want anything intrusive. I don't want an operation. Then don't give me that. And don't give me this medication and whatever. It might be sometimes they are wrong. And one could save their life. Like we said before, the easiest way is to convince them, you know what? We'll ask the Rav, whatever the Rav will do. They're from people. You will agree. If that can't happen for some reason, to make them upset is dangerous too. It depends what the matzav is. If it's real, a very serious situation, to make them upset, one is to find a way. They should notice that one gives them medication. They should notice they get the treatment. If not, that's a real shayla that has to be asked. If one should make the patient upset, because to be upset when they will be real upset, that's also not healthy. Yeah? There is in of yishuv data shel choyle, that the choyle should calm down. If one makes them upset, that's not a positive thing. Yeah? If one has to fight with parents, that could happen. They don't want a certain thing, and one has to fight. If there's no other way, and one is allowed to fight with them, one should rather children should refrain of doing that. The in-laws should fight, or the Rav should fight, or a good friend. That's al pi halacha, the Shulchan like that. When one has to treat its parents on a harsh way, one should rather, as a Gemara, Pshat Gemara, that one should rather give it away to somebody else to do it. It has to be done sometimes. When people are stubborn, they could be saved. One knows they could be saved. But children shouldn't do it, should rather not do it. Unless with a soft way, with a nice way, but sometimes it doesn't help. So maybe they should appoint somebody, the in-laws can do it, the grandchildren, siblings of the parents, or friends, or the Rav. But they could be a bit harsher. Children, there's a mitzvah of kibbutz, one has to be very careful with that. I want to finish with one thing that's famous. Rabbi Arleb Steinman, Zechoyne Tzadik Livrocha, said once, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu make it happen that so close then Mashiach comes, that people Baruch Hashem Omarech Yomim? Was never in history such a thing since the Oves. Yes, people Omarech Yom today more than 50 years ago. Yes. So he said, because Esav had one schus, the schus of Kibbut Avim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to take away the schus of Kibbut Avim from Esav and to give it to Yaakov. So he gives the parents Arichas Yomim, so that the children will have more opportunity to be mechaber the parents. That's our duty. This inyan of giving oneself away, l'shamesh, Agudah, like an evet, to give oneself away for the well-being of the parents. Thank you for listening. Good evening.
The doctor that the Rav mentioned, I'm not going to say his name either, and I'm not going to tell you which hospital, but this hospital with this doctor, this ethical from doctor practices, we sued them 3 times. Each time they had to listen to us, and each time the judge said that the hospital did not accommodate the family, and the hospital is obligated to accommodate the family. And many of the all the hospitals in the entire area know about these 3 lawsuits. Nevertheless, they still try to bully the family into giving up, and Chaim Aruchim is there to help them. I also want to say that one of the ways to help yourself is by saying that you're a religious person. It's not kedai to fight with the doctors and say that we believe that this is not ethical. We're not going to win on ethics, but when you say that you're a religious person, that usually helps. And finally, just in commenting on the Rav, the Dr. Leibowitz is the LTAC in Lakewood is also a tremendous place which helps keep people alive. Our next speaker is Gedalia Weinberger, who's going to introduce the next speaker. Gedalia is the chairman of the board of Chaim Aruchim, one of the founders. He brings to Chaim Aruchim an extensive knowledge and experience in business and in healthcare and in hashkafa. His presence in dealing with the hospital heads is and continues to be very valuable. It's my cover to introduce Gedalia, and he'll introduce the next speaker.
Okay, Barishus. I expected that we'd have some more young people, since this is being addressed in terms of Kibbutz Av V'Eim, which for most of us has really passed. But hopefully they'll be able to see and hear some of these comments, because they really are very important. I'm going to cut down the story since we're running a bit late. I just want to comment on 2 things. Hello? Okay, it's falling good. Okay. In last week's parsha, it said Chaye Sarah was Meya Shana, Esrim Shana, and Sheva Shanim. So all the Mefarshim talk about why does it say by 100 it says Shana, and by 20 it says Shana, and when it comes to the Sheva it says Sheva Shanim. So the Klei Yoker, I just want to read a drop of the language of what he says. He says as follows: Lefi shachasidim af al pi shekol yemehem shleimim, even though all their days are complete, mekol mokem yoser heim koinin shleimos b'shonim ha'achroinim ha'kroivim l'sharei moves mibiyomim ha'koidnim. That there is more importance to the end of life than there was to the beginning, and that's why the first 100 years it puts down as just as if it's a shana, the 20 years, but the last 7, every one of those days count. And we've encountered a lot of the problems that the Rav has mentioned. I remember having a meeting with certain physicians at Mount Sinai, which is a very good hospital in terms of accommodating us very, very nicely. And the physicians were saying, what's the point of letting people live so long? You know, they come to the end of the days, you have to let them go. And I said that if your goal is that the person is never going to eat steak again and he's not going to go golf, then that's something that you may be 100% right. But by us, we have a different standard. Have one more day of tefillah, one more day of seeing his children, one more day with his Zayniklah, that becomes critical, and it's worth everything to be able to save that. And to a certain degree, they understood, and we've had a very good relationship with our hospital. We have the phone number of the president of the hospital, and when certain things become problematic, we can call his cell phone, and really helps if it ever gets to that stage. But they found it helpful. And part of the reason of what they found helpful is that the people from Chaim Aruchim, who are assigned to different hospitals and deal with different questions, act as an intermediary very often between the family and the physicians and the Rav. Not every Rav knows exactly all the medical circumstances. The family doesn't always communicate the medical circumstances correctly. But when one of the members of Chaim Aruchim are involved, they help be that type of translator. We always send people to go to their Rav. Nobody tries to intercede otherwise. If they need, we help refer them if they have to have that. And the Rabbanim keep calling us because they know that the medical expertise is there. The Rabbanim that are involved with Chaim Aruchim were extensively trained by doctors and in halacha in order to accommodate that. The other part of what we talked about was the kibbud av aspect. And again, give me 1 second. The Chayodim that the Rav quoted, I believe it's Samach Zayin, which gives a list of rules of kibbud av v'em, and he says that shloisha shutfim heim ba'adam hamakim. That's the Gemara's Chazal tell us the hamakim Hakadosh Baruch Hu ava v'imoy. Chazal says bizman she'adam mechabed ava v'imoy omer Hakadosh Baruch Hu mala ani aleihem ki'ilu darti beineihem v'kavdoni. That if you mechabed it, then Hakadosh Baruch Hu is with you. And ubizman shemitzar av ve'imoy amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu yafo asisi shloi darti b'neihem shel moli hiisi b'neihem tzirani. They would have caused me sorrows. Part of the problem is that when you get to that late stage where children grow up, many times there are conflicts within families. The conflicts are there when the parents are still alive. Conflicts happened with Yerushas after they're alive, and that becomes a place that could be mitzara HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it is very important to be able to do things al pi halacha, to do things the right way, to accommodate it, so that therefore it really is the kibbud av v'em, so that the Shekhinah can be shayra. It's my pleasure to introduce my Eidim, Rabbi Marburger, who, first I just want to say something. Rabbi Gertzman ran out in the middle because he answered a Chaim Aruchim call. So there's no, and that of course is Daicha sitting here, as the Rav said, without question. And Rabbi Marburger, who is very expert in areas, and especially deals with cases of tzavos and some of the things that happened within families. Again, it's my pleasure. Kol tov.
The great rivalry between Yaakov and Esav was a rivalry that began literally in their mother's womb, Vayisroitzu Habanim B'Kerba. And it was a rivalry that will continue until the end of days, until V'olu Moshiach B'Hartziyah and Lishboides HaResav. And it was a rivalry that focused primarily on who would take over the legacy of their father. Who would be the Bechor to continue the Avodah of Yitzchak? Who would have the brachos? Who would be the ki bi Yitzchak yikar l'chazera? We know Maisa Avos Simin Labanim. And it seems many siblings have decided to follow that Messiah of conflict within the family. And similar to Yaakov and Esav, these fights, once they begin, continue on and on and on and on. It's very difficult to make shalom. But of course, the difference is that Yaakov's milchama was pure. It was l'shem shamayim. And those are not necessarily adjectives I would use to describe most disputes about Yerusha. But what I'd like to focus on tonight is that it's, as it should be pretty obvious, every situation is different. Every family has its unique dynamics. And what might be a brilliant solution or a wonderful eitzah for one situation would be a total disaster for another family. So I'd like to focus just on 3 areas which are just asking for trouble. So I'd like to begin with the most basic issue. And that is, we all know that the concept of Hilchos Yerusha. If a person dies, the Torah sets forth the Seder HaYerusha, who will receive his estate. Now, at the same time, we live in the United States, and we are all subject to civil laws. And Lahavdil, the civil court, also has a Seder HaYerusha. There also has a scheme and an order in which the assets are divided. It should be no surprise to anyone that these 2 orders are drastically different. As a matter of halacha, when a husband dies, his estate is yarshin, it passes to his sons. A wife is not a yorish. she does not get a part of the Yerusha. Now certainly, she is taken care of. She's entitled to a ksuba. Until she claims the ksuba, she's entitled to mezainis, to refuah shein lekitzvah, support, maintenance. Her needs are taken care of. But as far as the ownership of the assets, that passes to his sons. If the first child born is a male, if there's a bechor, he gets pishnayim. He gets a double share of the estate. He gets twice as much as his other brothers. The remainder of the estate is divided with his brothers. A daughter is not a Yerush. She will get nothing if she has any brothers. An adopted child in halacha is not a Yerush. It's not a biological child, and he does not get anything in Hilchos Yerusha. Now what that means is, if a person dies intestate, if he doesn't have a will, he doesn't have a trust, he doesn't have a tzava, he didn't do any estate planning, you're going to create a terrible situation. As a matter of halacha, the assets will belong to the sons. As a matter of law, it may pass to the daughters, it may pass to the wife. And you've created a tremendous, very dangerous situation for your children. On one hand, the son, or the sons, have every right to say, as a matter of halacha, the assets all belong to me. I never really got along very well with my brother-in-law. He wasn't mechaber our parents the way he should have, and I don't want him to get a share of the estate. In theory, he can do the same to his mother. While she's entitled to support and maintenance, she can't take ownership of the assets. So as a matter of halacha, on one hand, the money will pass to the yarshim, but at the same time, if the daughter or the wife is not prepared to follow these halachas, if it goes to court, then the judge will follow the civil laws, which will give the wife, will give the daughters, and perhaps give the adopted children a much greater share of assets that they're entitled to. Now what that means is, by failing to plan, you're creating a tremendous nisayon for your family. You're creating a situation where each of them, on one hand, one group of Yorshim will want to go to Beis Din and get their rights there. Another group may be tempted to ignore halacha and go to court and try to collect what they're entitled b'dinehem. And what emerges is that while a person may have worked his entire life in order to amass wealth, in order to accumulate assets to care and for his children and for his grandchildren, every dollar that he's earned is creating a bigger and bigger milchal, a bigger nisayon, and a greater incentive to fight. And therefore, it cannot be overstated how important it is. If a person has an idea of how he wants to divide his assets, if he wants to take care of his wife, if he wants to give his daughters a share, there are ways to do it, but it's critical. Write a tzava, write a will, write a trust. If you write a will and trust, again, there's a tremendous machlokes whether or not that has toikif in halacha, but at least there will be many shittas that will follow it. You're halfway there. Best practice, execute a shtar chatzi zachar on top of that in order to make it enforceable in halacha. But if your person's going to die without any estate planning, that can be a tremendous nisayon for the family. Now, even a person will say, I know my children, I don't have to take care of my wife because there's no way my children are wonderful. They're always mechabed me, they're always mechabed my spouse, and I'm not concerned that any of them will go ahead and run to Beis Din and try to take any assets away. So, a number of points to consider. The first is we're not just dealing with a child that will run to Beis Din and do something which is unethical or against halacha. We're dealing with a situation where, as a matter of halacha, the assets belong to them. And unless they go ahead and actively give it, they're moichelit, they give it to the mother, you're creating a situation where the spouse may be taking or using assets that she's simply not entitled to in halacha. Now, certainly, if the children have a sense of kibbud av, they're moichel, they allow them to keep it, wonderful. By mominus, you can do what you want, you can be moichel. But all too often, while a child may not have the chutzpah to go to the mother and say, this belongs to me, but they'll wait until they'll wait until after the mother passes away, and then when they're dealing with their siblings, suddenly the knives come out. Suddenly they come and say, really from past 20 or 30 years ago, these assets I already had rights to in halacha. Any present that our mother gave you over the past number of years, really I have the right to call that back. And there's a tremendous nisyanis, it can create tremendous problems later on. So the first point is, make sure you write a will, trust, some level of estate planning is the biggest chesed you can do for your mishpacha. Now the second point is managing expectations. The vast majority of families, even if there's some amount of tension, even if things aren't entirely clear, most children, most siblings have enough of a sense of yashrus, of kibbud av, and pride, and they generally, at the end of the day, will manage to work things out. One of the most difficult and challenging situations is when you have a parent, you have children that have certain expectations. You could have a person, that was recently a situation, the father was a very affluent businessman. For many years, he ran a very successful business. He lived a very, very affluent lifestyle. Some of his children were well off, some less well so. And in the back of their mind, they all expected that one day, Achamei v'Esrim, there would be a very nice payout. What had happened is that as the father aged, he still had a fancy office. He still went to work every day. He had to keep busy. But as he aged, he sort of lost his touch. And the business was struggling. And for a number of years, he was really living off his savings, off his principal. And it got to a point where he was really borrowing from one child who was somewhat of a partner in the business, and borrowing against the future Yerusha. Now, this fellow had a lot of pride. His entire life, he had been known as a successful and wealthy businessman. And he was too ashamed to let anyone know. And even his own family wasn't aware of what was going on. And what was happening is, or the situation that was being created was, that one day, Achamei v'Esrim, when the children, after the Shiva, they're expecting their wealthy father passed on, there must be a large estate. At that point, they're going to find out that there's virtually nothing left. Whatever is there is actually owed to one particular child that's running the business. And that's asking for trouble. Because just overnight, to accept the fact that your father, all these years, had lost all of his wealth, and especially when this one child who had been a partner had built up his own business, was wealthy in his own right, it's very challenging for siblings to be disappointed and to accept it. And very often they'll suspect that money was siphoned off. A story that I hear very often is my parents always had diamonds in a safe, they always had cash, and suddenly now there's nothing left. Now that might be true, but if you have that accusation and you think diamonds are missing, there's no way that anyone can prove a negative. And therefore the child that lived in the house, or you suspect, can't prove, there's no way to prove that he didn't take diamonds or he didn't take cash. If it was, he can just tell you that it wasn't there, the father spent it long ago. But therefore it's important to manage expectations. So while it might be difficult, people have pride, people don't want to admit to their children exactly where they're standing. But if they have a sense of what you have and what you don't have, and they have a sense of what to expect, Achamei v'Esrim, it'll make it all that much less likely for there to be an actual dispute. The final point, which is in many ways the most challenging, is that as people age, they become more vulnerable. And you can have a person who throughout his life was a very strong person. He was able to withstand any amount of pressure. He had a very strong, forceful personality. By the time you hit 95, you're probably going to slow down a bit. And as a person ages, he gets weaker. He gets more vulnerable. It becomes more and more difficult for him to resist pressure. That's true in any case. It's especially true if the elderly parent is dependent on a particular child. If he moves in with that child, the child cares for them. It's in that situation, if the child starts encouraging the father, they may start asking nicely, but every 2 or 3 days asking again and again and again, talking about their struggles, talking about how hard it is and how much they do for the parents, and apply pressure. very often it becomes impossible for an elderly parent to resist that pressure. And they may go ahead and they may change their will, they may change their tzavah in order to, and give the lion's share or the bulk of the estate to that particular child. Now, sometimes this is perfectly appropriate. Hakaras HaTayv is a midah that certainly children should have the parents, but a parent who is taken care of by a child, it makes sense for them to have Hakaras HaTayv. But all too often, it's not just their Hakaras HaTayv, it's Hakaras HaTayv which is encouraged or pushed or pressured by a child. And even if that's not the case, the siblings may believe that's the case. And if you have a situation like that where the parent will go ahead and in later years change the tzavah in favor of one particular child, even if that reflects their true desire, the siblings may not see it like that. Now, b'dinehem, there are many laws protecting against this. When you have undue influence, if a parent changes the will when they're under the control and dependent on a child, very often the default will be to assume this will or this change is invalid unless you can prove it otherwise. However, in halacha, there are no such protections. In halacha, even a person whose mind is deteriorating, to get to the level where you're lav bar das, where your actions are not binding, you have to be pretty bad off, much worse than in halacha. And therefore, this is a tremendous chashash, this is a tremendous concern. And a person has to realize, as he's aging, that on one hand, people want to maintain their independence. People do not want to give up control of their assets because they want to feel like they're in control, they want to feel like the balabas, and they should. To give away your assets, mechayim, it's one of gimel shetzoikim einonenim, kosim mechas l'banav v'chayiv. You give away your assets to your children. If you need it, they may or may not give it back. But on the other hand, if a person waits too long and he retains control of the assets when he's not up to the responsibility and not up to withstanding pressure, then again, it can create a tremendous problem in the family. If a person is able to set up some sort of trust where there's some independent person who's younger and stronger who would be able to look out for your best interests, that can save the family from tremendous nisyonos and tremendous heartache down the road. I'd just like to end off with one thought. I was recently talking to someone who was concerned. He was working out his estate plan. He was being responsible about it. And he had a number of concerns about this child, about that child, about this scenario and that scenario. So at some point I turned to him and I told him that you have to understand. I'm here, I'll write a shtar chatzizachar, I'll write a tzavah, I'll write documents in order to protect you under most situations. At the end of the day, if you've failed in the chinuch of your children, if your children are people who dollars mean more than shalom, dollars mean more than yashrus, and are not people who do not know what it means to be mavater, there are no documents in the world, there are no structures in the world that are going to compensate for that lack of chinuch. And therefore, when a person is thinking about these issues, he's thinking about his estate plan and what to do and how to plan for it. In truth, the planning doesn't start when you go to your lawyer or to your rav to draft the documents. The planning starts much earlier. When you're bringing up your children, if your children see that you're a person, what you stand for is shalom. If your children see that to you doing what's right is more important than the bottom line, how many dollars you're going to get. If they see that in you, then you know that you've succeeded in passing along a legacy. And that legacy is going to be much more important and much more valuable than the dollars and the real estate and the diamonds that you may have passed along. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our final speaker is Rabbi Eliezer Gortzman. So far, we've heard from the Rav the responsibility of children to the parents. We've now heard from the responsibility of parents to their children. Now we're going to hear from Rabbi Gortzman about the key medical issues that come up all the time amongst the thousands of calls of T'chaim Aruchim that you have to know even before in order to ask a shayla, you have to be somewhat knowledgeable in order to know that there's a problem and that you need help. It's my covet to introduce Rabbi Eliezer Gortzman, one of the senior rabbanim of Chaim Aruchim.
Thank you, Reb Shmuel. just to quickly run through a number of issues, probably to try to keep to the most important ones as the hour is late. There are a number, obviously, to encompass all the shilas that come up is something which is very, very difficult to do, especially in the few minutes that we have. But I think if there's one rule that we could take with us, people always want to know, tell me everything that I need to know about end-of-life care, so this way I'll never have to ask a shayla, ever. It's obviously an impossible thing to do. But if there's one rule that we could have in the back of our pockets, I think what that rule is, one is obligated to do everything to help a patient unless a Rav tells you otherwise. Very often people are put under tremendous pressure, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. An entire hospital staff will come. We have 5 minutes to decide. Yes, intubate, no intubate. Yes, resuscitate, no resuscitate. Families panic. If there's one thing that you could take with you to always keep in mind, that is, Safik b'kuach nefesh lahachmir. I cannot take someone's life into my own hands unless a Rav gives me a heter to do so. And if I can't get a hold of a Rav, even if I find out later that the Rav may have told me that what I did was not necessary, I did the right thing because under the circumstances, that is my obligation. Every once in a while, we find ourselves in a situation where someone will call up the Chaim Aruchim hotline and say, my parent is in cardiac arrest, what should I do? And the answer immediately is, resuscitate and resuscitate and resuscitate. We don't have time to discuss this. This is something that has to be done immediately. In addition, it's important to realize, Baruch Hashem, it doesn't come up very often. Someone alluded to it earlier. There are confirmatory tests that are done for brain death patients. Some of these tests are very questionable al pi halacha, to say the least, but also put the patient at a tremendous disadvantage with the law. Under no circumstances should a family agree to a confirmatory brain death test. Sometimes they'll feel, let me see if they're actually brain dead, and then I'll see how to deal with it halachically. That is incorrect. One should immediately explain to the family, explain to the doctors that religiously we reject to having a brain death test done. A third point that I would like to bring up, which is regarding Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's, Rahman al-Itzlan, is a disease that we're all too familiar with. Yet, there are statistics in the world that show that once a patient reaches end-stage Alzheimer's, which means that they can no longer care for themselves. This patient could be in shul 3 times a day, maybe a little confused, maybe he thinks he's back in Europe, but he can no longer take care of himself. Statistics show that that patient has less than 1 year to live. And the question that everyone has when we hear that is, we all know patients that live much longer than that. Why are the statistics giving such a short life expectancy? And the answer is because in the world around us, once a patient reaches that point, they no longer treat their infections, they no longer look to feed that patient, and not only that, they will very often say that feeding tubes won't even help such a patient. I remember one of the first patients that I've dealt with Chaim Aruchim was a question of an Alzheimer's patient to put in a feeding tube. And the doctor got on the phone with me and said, Rabbi, no matter what you're going to do, this patient will not live more than 6 weeks. It's 6.5 years later, and this patient is still alive. As family members dealing with Alzheimer's patients, it's important to realize that the doctor who has in his mind the best interest of the patient in mind does not understand the halachic ramifications and the important ethical views that this patient has. And therefore, it is important for family members to check and double check. If a patient is losing weight, this patient used to be, it doesn't make a difference, 350 pounds. And now the patient is down to 250 pounds. as any of us who have ever been on a diet knows, we don't lose weight by ourselves. If a patient is losing weight, they are not getting adequate nutrition, regardless of what their mental status is. And it's incumbent upon the families to be on top of it. Alzheimer's is a very progressive disease. If an Alzheimer's patient takes a sudden turn for the worst, chances are, although the doctor may insist that it's the Alzheimer's, chances are there's an infection or something else that's going on. And it's important for the family to be on top of the medical staff and the personal doctor to ask, did you culture the urine? Very often it's a UTI. It could be pneumonia, and so on. I just want to end off with one thought. As the Rav mentioned, as many of the speakers mentioned, we very often find ourselves in a situation where we're under immense pressure. The doctors are questioning us. Very often the doctors will say straight out, I believe what you're doing is unethical and cruel. That's something which is very difficult to hear. And very often we get swept away in an emotional moment. He said what I'm doing is cruel. How do we deal with that? I just saw this past week, brought down in the name of the Zohar, that each day of our lives is an entity. If we don't do any Averis on that day will service us, la'asad lavoi, to be there as a dress for our neshama. Every day that we unfortunately do Averis gets pushed on the side, and if we do tshuva, it comes back. Each person comes down onto this world with a certain amount of days that are given to them that are needed for their neshama la'asad lavoi. Each day is important. Every day that is missing, la'asad lavoi, there'll be one day missing on the neshama. Explain this to a Goyish doctor. The golf, the football, that's what a day is. To us, a day is so much greater and has so much more meaning. We don't always understand, and very often it's difficult to watch our loved ones in difficult situations. But we believe, and we were taught from Maimer HaSinai, we're not living in this world for this world. This world is just a hallway, where each day, every single one of them is important. And when we come in with that belief, and the doctor says to us, you're putting them on a respirator, it's only a matter of a few weeks. A few weeks, that's 42 days. What does that mean? We then are able to shake ourselves off from the galus around us and to say to ourselves that we must immediately look to our Rabbanim and our Gedolim, to our Torah that takes an entire life and perspective, what we see and we don't see. And we should be zoiche that through this session, where we discussed issues that are not so geschmack to discuss, on the Shalma Parim Sifoseinu, we should be zoiche that through our learning and through our discussions, we should never be faced with any of these nisyanis. Thank you.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.